Hello and welcome to the Anomaly Project, the agenda, the show where we look ahead to our upcoming episode. I'm Marcus Lowth, and joining me as he does every week is Steve Mera. Now, Steve, we're going to have another cracker of a show this week. We're speaking to Nick Kyle, a good friend of yours. I know. I'm sure we've got a lot to expect. I'm sure you're looking forward to it.
Always is. I mean, I've visited Nick a few times, and we've hung out and talked for hours, and there's never a dull moment. He's got a huge amount of history behind his work, and not just himself, Sarah, his wife as well. And what he's experienced and what he's been involved in is just absolutely incredible.
Mm.
And if I hadn't known Nick and who knows the people that he knows and witnessed things as well. It's some of the stuff is really hard to believe, but it's all you can say is, as Nick would say, it is what it is, and these things did happen, and they do happen, continue to. And if you're privy to seeing it and experience it, it's life changing. It
Mm.
really is, and there's nobody better, but really good explaining about his experiences and what he's been involved in than himself. To be honest with you, he's an absolutely fascinating gentleman.
Yeah, I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that he's kind of, I won't say multi-talented because that might be the wrong word, although it certainly is true. But he's got expertise and knowledge in different areas. He's gone out hunting ghosts, for want of a better phrase. He's been involved in seances, and he can even do healing as well. And so he's kind of immersed in this stuff, really.
It seems to be, yeah, it seems to be a lot of different things. I mean, I don't think it all came in that, or in all
Yeah.
together. I think there was obviously sequences, but
Hmm.
he's been involved in paranormal research and investigation. But there's one simple cause for that, and that is because he believes that he feels the necessity to be able to help people, and I totally get that. There was no better drive than that, and
Hmm.
it's not about fame, it's not about money, it's about helping people. And if he can help, I've seen Nick to go tremendous lengths, even travel the halfway around the world and back, which he's been involved with me on some things, just to help people. And it's incredible when there are people like that out there
Hmm.
that are simply just want to assist. And not only that, but to learn. And Nick has done that. He's been on his own journey, of course. It's impossible not to be part of that journey. And as that has unfolded, and his acute abilities to be able to converse with spirit,
Hmm.
and that's the best way I can describe it. These are the challenging times sometimes too when you hear about these things, but it's funny, it's humorous on some occasions, and it's quirky,
Hmm.
and it's like throwing yourself to the wind sometimes, you
Yeah,
know.
I mean, yeah, we're gonna have to get his opinion. Yeah, well, not his opinion is some of his anecdotes, I suppose, for want of a better word, because I believe he's dealt with lots of different people. I believe he's experienced lots of different things, and ultimately, I don't know if he describes himself as such, but he's a medium, he's a spiritualist. A spirit, should I say? So we'd have to get his thoughts on who he thinks is actually in contact with. Because does he have a guardian angel, a spirit guide? Is it just different entities? I'm sure he's got some thoughts on that,
It
much
is
like we have.
interesting. It's interesting when you talk about spirit guides
Hmm.
because Nick has been involved in that sort of area as well, and I've been involved in research, of people who have spirit guides.
Hmm.
We were involved in investigations pertaining to spirit guides around about 2000 and well, we went from 2003 to 2016 doing some of the experiments. It's probably around about 2014 or 15 or something like that. And it was interesting about spirit guides do seem to be something different. They're not really, I don't seem to see as a spirit of a person who once lived on Earth before,
Okay.
but something different and equally assisting and seemingly for no reason. I mean, it's not like, oh, well, because it's easy to think, oh, well, what are they after at the end of the day? Why are they helping? The
Hmm.
ultimate questions. But they seem to be very helpful, and they can be and can be utilized. And a lot of people do seem to have spirit guides, and the big question mark is, what really are spirit guides? It seems to be something a little bit different.
Hmm.
Certainly are, and Nick can certainly share a bit more about that. I'm sure he can.
Yeah, I bet he can, but I'd certainly have to ask him. I mean, also from what I know of Nick, and obviously I'm not as familiar with him as yourself, but I mean, his outlook on life in general is positive. And, you know, I mean, there's also obviously two sides to the paranormal world. We both know there's, you know, there's a good side, a positive side, negative. And, you know, life in itself can't exist without these two opposing sides. But there is,
I think you're right. I think you do have to have this yin and yang
yeah, yeah,
situation,
yeah.
you know, and equally, you know, you can have phenomena produced
Mm-hmm,
through positiveness
mm-hmm,
or negativeness. You know, it seems like both will get to the source, but there are two different, significant different ways of doing this. And sometimes disturbances are because there's something positive it's trying to communicate, certain things, or there's some negative stuff that's been associated for one reason or another. But that's what's interesting is that sometimes when you're just dealing with phenomena, being
mm-hmm.
disturbances, you don't really know what you're going to be dealing with until you kind of get in there and start doing the work. But Nick has been involved in both, you know, these positive cases of contact and also some you might consider the negative stuff. I wouldn't say dark because it kind of emphasizes that something which is really bad, but it could simply be like, you know, when you walk down the street and you meet somebody, you know, there's not like they're exactly cut from a different cloth. They're just it's the way they think and the
Mm-hmm.
intent, you know, and what they're wrapped up in and stuff. So I think it can be both sides. But when you get involved, like Nick has, he's seen both sides of this,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
he's seen some wonderful things, including when you mentioned about healing and some incredible stuff. And enough to sort of say healing exists. Be it
Mm-hmm.
psychic healing or faith healing or hands-on healing or whatever you want to call it, it does exist and it
Yeah.
is does work. But Nick will probably also say that because knowing what he's like, is that there's a world of rubbish
Oh,
out
yeah, yeah.
as well,
Mm-hmm.
and trying to sift through it is an absolute nightmare. And
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, it's difficult, but real things do happen. But the problem is that it doesn't get heard very often. When it does get heard, people don't want to believe it. You know,
Mm.
they just think it's another rubbish out there on the internet and stuff that they read. But good stuff is lost because of that. It's a shame.
Yeah, it's a tough one, this, isn't it? Because I was speaking to someone about this, I don't know, a few months ago, not about this, but about the amount of, like you say, rubbish or disinformation, or you know, they were ultimately saying something like, "Oh, I wish we had less choices because there's so much crap out there." You know, which I think, yeah, I agree. But at the same time, I also would always go onto the side of, well, look, just give me it all, let me see it all, even the crap. Do you know what I mean? Because you get to a point where, well, who's deciding what's crap and what isn't? Do you know what I mean? I remember having a UFO investigator. I'll not name them because I am actually quite friendly with them, but they contacted me. I wrote an article, box standard article, nothing special, no revelations, just a recount of it, really. And they got hold of me and said, "Why are you writing this article? It's absolute nonsense. It never happened." Blah 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 blah. And I was quite feisty about saying, "Well, who are you to say that? I'm going to document this, and the readers will say whether they decide it's bullshit
Yeah,
or not, not yourself." So, yeah, I accept there's a problem with all this information coming and flying and people wanting to make a name for themselves and blah, blah, blah. But I think if we start to try and shut some of that down, we risk losing some more
that's the
information.
problem. I mean, you can never, and I've fallen foul of this, and Nick knows that. You know, you can't judge a book by its cover. It's so
Mm. Yeah,
easily
yeah,
done.
yeah, yeah.
But you will miss opportunities if you do. And suddenly you're enlightened and thought, my God, how close did I come to not knowing this?
Mm-hmm.
You know, because of your thought and your attitude that everybody's out to try and scam you or fakes and
Yeah, yeah,
disinformation for numerous different things. But then there is quality things out there, and
yeah.
more so than we actually ever would think. People are going about just living the normal lives, but there's some strange and fantastic things which is taking place out there. You know, and people witness it firsthand. It changes their lives, and it'll change the lives of people if they witnessed it. To be honest with you, but it doesn't happen enough, and that's a shame. And science doesn't help because, like I say, taking it into the lab just doesn't work sometimes. And it's not because it's fake or hoaxy.
No, no,
It's
no.
basically because it's just never works like that. Phenomena doesn't work in the sense that click your fingers and I want it to work in the lab at 6 o'clock. Thank you very much. And if it doesn't, it's dodgy.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
doesn't work like that. You know, it's pliable, but you've got to sometimes you know, do things a little bit differently. And like I say, science doesn't always help.
No, I mean, I think science has got its part to play, but I agree with you. I mean, science is so rigid, the mainstream science at least is so rigid, which is unscientific in itself, because surely, science is basically asking questions. I do think it's got its role to play. I do believe that science, if it finds its own way there, we'll be able to provide some kind of answers. And now that's not to say that we're going to get a rational explanation. It's almost that science will catch up with this phenomena, is what I'm kind of saying. If you look at, say, when trains were first being dreamt up and thought about, people thought if a train went more than 20 miles an hour, your body would turn inside out. It's
He did
science and
actually,
people
yeah.
who would not have said, well, no, let's just try it. That's wrong. I think you're wrong. If that had happened, we never would have progressed. So
Exactly.
science, yeah, I agree. It's his own worst enemy in many ways, but
Yeah.
you do need to kind of drag them along with us because
You
it's,
really do. I
you
mean,
know,
Nick put it so plainly when I talked to him a few weeks ago, and because I was saying about, well, what answers? I mean, what answers have we got to come up with?
mm,
And he put it so plain. He said, we don't even know what questions to ask.
no,
Now
absolutely
we've got
correct.
to a point. It's just like, wow, what question do you ask? Because it's
Mhm.
just like, would you even understand the answer? To be honest. But there's evidence of this all over the world, and it's been going on for a long time of
Yeah,
some
yeah,
type of interaction. Now, be somebody who's passed over and is their you see, it's a tricky situation because the thing is, Marcus, is that when we pass over,
yeah,
we have this idea. Now, the science and the studies that we've performed would suggest when people pass over, they're around for a short duration, covered up to be maybe 3 months or something. But
yeah,
they are demonstrative by doing things. And you think, well, since somebody's passed away, I've got all these strange things happening all of a sudden in the house. It's like they leave me a message to let me know that they're okay or whatever. It's down to our interpretation. I think it takes
yeah,
a lot of energy to manifest into a spirit form, an apparition, or even vocally
mm-hmm.
converse. But with the energies that can be utilized, I think it's like moving things around, leaving you clues to let you interpret the I'm around. Those things tend to take place regularly when someone's passed. But then after a certain period of time, it
Mm.
just stops. So what happens? Have they transitioned somewhere else? And of course, what about their consciousness? Now, there's talk about reincarnation.
Mm-hmm.
If we
Mm-hmm.
get reincarnated, we might have sometimes little, the veil is a little bit thin and we get some information of past life, this, that, and the other. But is that truly your consciousness or just an imprint of it? Because
Yeah,
where's
fair
that
point.
consciousness go, or does it stay somewhere else? We get reincarnated consciousness from your previous consciousness stays here. And what are we communicating with? Are we communicating with you, or are we communicating with your consciousness? You see, because there's a
Yeah.
difference here.
No, I get what you're saying. I mean, my understanding of it, and obviously, who knows, like you say, on this stuff. But my understanding of it is if you are reincarnated, then that is your consciousness that goes into that new body. Obviously, so you may recall previous lives of existence. I mean, because consciousness is essentially energy, isn't it? And energy always
Well,
has to be around. It has to be
yeah,
doing something. It
yeah.
won't just ever die. So, but I agree. We just don't know. Just going back to a point you made, though, is this is quite interesting when you said about when people pass away and they often sometimes will come back and leave signs for people. So I'm doing okay. My wife's mother, when she passed away, they'd always had this thing where if I die, her mother would say, then I will come back and I will let you know that there's an afterlife and that I'm okay. And she said, just light a candle on the day of my funeral or whenever, just any time after I've died, and I'll return, I'll blow it out. Now she did this when her mother passed away, and the candle wasn't blown out. I came downstairs that morning. I blew it out myself because it was still burning. And I sat in a chair and I was reading, and I dozed off, and all of a sudden, and I'll die on this hill, clear as day, I could hear a boom right in my ear, exactly how my wife's mother would have said it. And it was so clear. And all I can think is that was her only way to try and let Tracy know that she was okay. Now,
Yes.
whether that is because I might be more open to that because I'm more open minded of that kind of thing, Whether
Yeah,
I was just in the right place at the right time, I don't know. But that's the only thing we've ever experienced of her. So it's interesting
it's
what you say. Did he hang
interesting.
around or?
Yeah, I know. There's so many people talk about this, and I
Hmm.
totally get it, and I totally agree. The thing is, though, I mean, we might be looking at pockets of energy because to
Yeah,
develop
true.
and do an act
Mm.
requires energy, and maybe that just when we're sat there waiting for it to happen, there's just not enough energy for, and they might get a bit frustrated. Can you imagine what it's like? Frustration for them. He's frustrated. I can't. I've not gone. But then sometime later, there's a pocket of energy, and I'm going to utilize it. Boom, and that energy level goes. Once it's been utilized, it's like draining of a battery and it's got to build up again, that sort of thing.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
What's really interesting is that we have this concept in our mind, don't we, that we reincarnate, we take the consciousness with us into the next body.
yeah.
So when we see people claiming to, I've conversed with Winston Churchill, I conversed with this person, and they've been gone for years.
Hmm.
So are we saying that there are so many people who just don't get reincarnated? Or
Well,
have they gone reincarnated and are we dealing with their consciousness? This is the reason why I think we have to sort of consider what is one and what is the other. We might have an imprint of where the consciousness used to be. It's like a hard drive, and this is, Anthony Peake talks about your brain acting like a bit of a
yeah,
hard drive.
true. Yeah.
And he thinks, like many others do, is that something comes along and overwrites the old.
Hmm.
But like any hard drive that you have and you format it, the information's still there.
Oh, yeah,
It's
yeah, yeah.
just non-reachable. But there are ways to get the information out. And I think maybe it acts a bit like that. But is that the true info? Is that because it's formatted, and so that's consciousness is gone, but there's still an element of it all there in some form.
It's an interesting. I can buy that. I would buy that. It's an interesting, and I'm not saying that could be completely true.
Yeah.
Actually, it's an
But
interesting thing.
but
The
this
only
this is
thing I
this
would say
yeah.
is, I mean, you brought up Winston Churchill for example, so we all know who
Yeah.
he is. So it's a good example, actually.
Yeah.
But you could argue, and maybe a spirit person would argue that Churchill maybe achieved what he had to achieve within this life, within this earthly realm. People say you reincarnate because you haven't learned all the lessons that you need to learn, whatever they are, or you maybe haven't lived a good life. Now, Churchill, without getting all political, he was a bad man in many ways, but he was a great
Yeah.
man in many ways too.
Well, yeah, well,
And so maybe what he did with the Third Reich and the war in Europe, maybe that was
was
his
it
enough.
enough to tip
Maybe
the
I
box?
don't know. I'm not saying I necessarily
This
buy
is
that,
we
but
just do not know. But these are the
no.
sort of questions that
Mm.
our guest it would dive into because
Yeah, yeah.
this is what he sits there and thinks about. He thinks about what is frequencies, what is
Mm.
consciousness, how do
Yeah.
you heal? Is it me healing somebody, or is it something that is healing through me?
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
know, and it's
Yeah.
like spiritual communications when you're getting information. Are you getting it because you're gifted, or are you attuned enough to allow something to provide the information to you? These are the sort of things that Nick Kyle looks into and
Mm.
questions. He goes into quite depth about the studying because he's quite happy to look at something and even say, look, I'm not even going to suggest that because I might rule that out. And he's very critical of his own work and his own experiences. And that's a good thing to have
Oh yeah.
because you can
Yeah.
rule out, all right, well, I witnessed something today which was incredible, but then I was on my own. Is it worth mentioning? Probably not. You know, but to others, that would be like, I've got to shout this from the roof. This is what I've experienced. And it doesn't mean he didn't have that experience. It's just sad that but it happens like that. But it's a scientific approach. It has that scientific approach about always trying to reach good data and evidence to
Yeah.
provide,
Yeah. What I would
and it's a
say
shame.
about that, about like you say, is it worth mentioning? Maybe not. Maybe that's a personal choice. What I would say though is you need to make a record of those things. You need to note those things down, even if it's you just saw something very trivial, no one else saw it, blah 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 blah. Because eventually you'll build up a big, massive picture of this is happening. You've called it circumstantial evidence in a court of law, for example.
You
So
would,
you
yeah.
you do need to document this stuff, even if you're not going to speak about it or put it into the public arena. It's my own personal
Well, yeah,
opinion.
because anyone can challenge it and say, well, have you got any evidence? Well, no. But does that mean that you should never share it because you've got no evidence?
No,
No, it doesn't.
no, it doesn't at all.
Otherwise, we'd never learn anything in life,
Absolutely.
you know?
Yep.
So eventually, at some point, I think it's good. You've got to share, but at some point you can turn around and say, but I don't have the evidence, so don't ask me if I have evidence about it, because it was just an incident that happened. I wasn't prepared for it, came out of the blue. It
Yeah,
wasn't planned
absolutely.
for, we're an experiment. And if these things happen, I'm going to talk about it, but then I'm not going to give it that much credence, should we say, because
Yeah.
I like to look at data. And this is what Nick does.
Yeah, that's like you say, it depends how you're putting it across. If you're putting things across as absolute fact, but if you're there putting caveats in, like you've just said, well, there were no one else saw this. I'm not sure even if what I think I saw with. If you're putting those caveats in, if you're being critical yourself, then I don't think anyone can attack you for that. To be honest with you, but I mean, Steve, we're
No.
going to have to start wrapping this up. I mean, what are your final thoughts on speaking to Nick Kyle? Because
Well,
it's going to be a mammoth one, I
I've
think.
spent quite some time with Nick and his wife Sarah, and
Yeah,
we've been involved in a number of things, and we've witnessed some strange and unusual things over some time. So I can hold my hands up without any shadow of doubt that this man is probably one of the most authentic people I've ever met, and I know that from being there and experiencing things as well,
yeah.
and that includes his wife. Very sincere, the pair of them, and it falls on. It's really refreshing. Falls on your ears. It really refreshing nowadays, and they continue even now to travel the country and conduct their lectures, their presentations. They've got some incredible material over that they gathered over the years,
Hmm.
and their lecturing or their presentation skills are fantastic. I've never seen such a class act, of being able to work together, and it's actually full in excitement to watch them both lecture together. It's not mundane at all. It's very exciting. You feel part of it, So they lecture in a certain way. But they've recently both been to Glastonbury. He's provided two lectures, I think, in Glastonbury
Okay.
for Andy Thomas recently. And they were in my at mine awakening events in May with a fascinating presentation. So I'm sure Nick will be sharing some of those details, some of that information, which is going to be very interesting.
Yeah, it's going to be absolutely fascinating. It really is. Look, Steve, thanks ever so much as always. It's just a
Welcome.
fountain of knowledge. So it's absolutely fantastic to speak with you. And I'm looking forward to it like you. It's going to be a good show. And thank you guys for joining us as always. Make sure you subscribe to our channel. Make sure you check us out on social media and check out the Anomaly Project podcast.com for further articles and information. Until next time, goodbye and take care.